Hello, honeybees. This is Jasper. This is Edie. I'm Raven. And welcome back to our channel.
Subscribe to become part of the hive. Be sure to like and ring the notification bell. Thanks, honeybees. Enjoy the video.
Meow. Okay, say bye. Bye. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. Been a minute. I have some movies to catch us up on. I've seen a lot over the past couple of months. As busy as I've been, it's been hard to sit down and film a video, so finally doing it now. I'm not going to talk about all the movies that I've seen. I want to talk about two in particular that I have a lot to say about. Unfortunately, this is a hater video, as someone call it, because normally, I've always said it before, if I don't like a movie, I tend to have more to say about it than if I liked a movie. But for the sake of no one believing that I'm actually a hater of all movies, let me go through some of the movies that I've seen the past couple of months that I really liked, and then we'll get into what this video is actually about. So a few things that weren't in theaters. Love Has Won, The Cult of Mother God on HBO Max, or Max, I guess. I really enjoyed that documentary. It's a docuseries, 3 episodes. That one was interesting. I liked it. There's a new Mike Birbiglia special called The Old Man in the Pool on Netflix. I really enjoyed that too. I like to consume new media that's not just in theaters, so things that are on streaming too, which I'll mention as well. Thanksgiving by Eli Roth. I thought that one was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I might up it to 3.5 when I kind of review all the movies I've seen at the end of the year. It was really interesting. I liked the kills. Some things here and there didn't make sense, but it's a Thanksgiving slasher. It's not supposed to be analyzed like I usually do. It was actually quite enjoyable. I wasn't bored. I liked that one. Trolls Band Together was a really cute movie, better than I haven't seen the first Trolls, but I saw Trolls World Tour, which was enjoyable. Trolls Band Together, I had a great time watching. I actually really liked the storyline. I liked those characters. I liked all the music. It was a really fun, enjoyable film. I gave that one a 3.5. And then, of course, there's the movies that I mentioned in my last catch-up video. The Killer was really enjoyable. The Holdovers I liked quite a bit. Killers of the Flower Moon, of course. Five Nights at Freddy's was okay. So there's a lot of movies that I've seen recently that I liked. But everything I said about them just now or in my previous video, that's about all I have to say about them. I guess I could get into the analysis of it. But really, at the end of the day, all I have to say about movies that I liked is that I liked them. I wasn't bored. I enjoyed them. Good cinematography, good characters. What else is there to say, And I don't know. I enjoy a hater video here and there, so hopefully some of you do too. So I'm going to talk about some other movies that I saw that I didn't really like. I'm going to talk about 2 of them today, and then I'm going to honorably mention a few other movies that I've seen these past few months that I also didn't like but won't be making a video about. But we'll just get into the ones that we were talking about today. Dream Scenario and Saltburn. The reason I want to pinpoint these 2 movies in particular is because they were both movies that I really thought I was going to like and that I was actually really looking forward to, and I was disappointed by them. I think it might be different if I was going in with no expectations or just going in oh yeah, it's just a movie to see, it looks fine, whatever, but I actually had kind of high expectations for both of them. The trailers really did a good job. The marketing did a good job, getting me excited for these movies. And, the taller you are, the harder you fall, as they say. When my expectations are high and the movie is just okay, it feels even worse than if I'm going in thinking it might just be okay. You know what I mean? So these 2 movies kind of illustrate that for me. Starting off with Dream Scenario, starring Nicolas Cage, who, honestly, Nicolas Cage in this movie did his best. He always does his best. I've yet to see a Nicolas Cage film where he's phoning it in, no matter what it is, whether it's a big theatrical movie like this or something smaller, something straight to streaming, whatever. He always gives it his all, and I really appreciate that because he's a good actor. It just matters if it's a good script and a good director, if the performance is good, right? Because he just gives what he's being asked to give usually, and sometimes people don't know what to ask of him. In Dream Scenario, he was pretty perfect for his role. He plays this college professor who lives kind of this boring life. He's got a wife and kids, and he's nothing spectacular. He hasn't really done a whole lot with his life. He, studied this one particular subject, and now he teaches it, and he's a tenured professor, which is great. That's something to accomplish, but that's kind of all he's doing with his life. He keeps talking about wanting to write a book or a paper or get something published, but he's not actually working on it. He's that kind of guy, just your average guy. And something extraordinary happens to him. And that's like the basis for the movie. What got me really interested in this movie is the premise. Just this average, boring guy who everyone starts to dream about. Nobody knows why, how it's happening, what's going on, but suddenly this random man is popping up in everybody's dreams. Interesting. Where are they going to go from there, is what I thought when I was going in to see the movie. How did this happen? How does it end? Does it end? What are these dreams about? What does he do about it? Right? These are all the questions I had, and so I was really interested to see where this movie went. But when I watched the movie, it made me feel like they had that premise, and then they didn't really know where to go with it. So everybody starts dreaming about him, and at first, he's just kind of there in everybody's dreams. Just kind of like in life. He's just there. And that kind of like weirdly offends him, which was funny. But he just starts appearing first, in his kids' dreams, his friends' dreams, his students' dreams, pretty normal. And then people he's never even met before start dreaming about him and seeing him on the street and realizing they've had dreams about him and things like that. And it spreads. It becomes sort of a phenomenon. And then the dreams start getting different. He starts getting involved in people's dreams. Some people have sex dreams about him, and that creates some weird situations for him where particularly one girl wants to try to recreate the sex dream with him because it was so real and vivid in her dream. She wants to feel it in real life, and then it's just obviously completely different in real life. And then once that happens, they all progress into nightmares. Everybody starts having these horrible, horrible nightmares about him where he's hurting them, kidnapping them, just doing these awful things to the point where nobody wants to be around him because of how he acts in their dreams. Now, obviously, dreams are not real life, and he's not doing anything. He's playing into it a little bit at first, like getting news coverage and getting a little bit of like a 15 minutes of fame from this, hoping it'll help him get to the point where he can find a publisher to publish his books that have nothing to do with the situation, but getting himself out there, right? Like I think a lot of us would, using this to his advantage or trying to. But then when everyone starts to have nightmares, his life starts to fall apart. And one of the parts that really frustrated me about this movie is how everybody acts towards him when these dreams start to become nightmares. At first, everybody wants to talk to him and find out what's going on. They're fans of him, kind of. More and more students start showing up to his class, and they all want to talk about their dreams. Once they become nightmares, everybody avoids him. Which, listen, on the one hand, I understand. If you're having these really vivid nightmares about one person, you probably wouldn't want to be around them all that much. If you're having regular, nightly, terrible dreams about them, I get that. Maybe I don't want to be around you quite as much. If you're like my teacher and I have to be around you, I'll suck it up. I might be thinking about these nightmares while I'm in your class, but I'm an adult. I can handle it. It's just a dream at the end of the day. I'm not actually in any real danger. I realize that. It seems like nobody in the world of this movie thought logically about this or realized that. And they all start not only to avoid him, which again I understand if that was it, but actively antagonize him as if it's his fault, which really frustrated me because a few people doing this, being irrational, okay, I get that, but it's groups of people. Almost everybody who's having these nightmares. His whole class, they stop coming to class, and then they vandalize his car. They start yelling at him, calling him a loser, telling him to get out. He gets fired even though he's tenured. He loses his job. And his wife separates from him. They don't get divorced or anything, but she makes him move out, and at the end of the movie, they are separated and nothing is resolved. So his life literally falls apart. And after it does, the dreams just stop. No explanation to how they started, no explanation to how they ended. It starts pretty average, gets a little weird, then gets really scary. And then after he's lost everything, he does write a book about the situation. But that's not what he wanted to write a book about, and it's not quite as successful as he had hoped. But he had to move out from his house. He lost his job, so that's all he's doing is promoting this little book that he wrote about the situation. So his life is pretty much fallen apart. The dreams stop, and that's it. And on top of that, what's very frustrating is everybody expects him to apologize, like I said. They think somehow it's his fault. Now, I've done this before. I'm a girl. I've had dreams where my boyfriend or my friends, somebody, I've done this to my brother before, where I'll have a dream about him being mean to me, and then the next day I'll tell him about it and say, I think you should apologize. But I don't mean it. It's a joke. This is way to the extreme, and it really gets out of hand in a way that is extremely unrealistic. And you might say, well, Raven, the movie is unrealistic. Yeah, but it's not complete fantasy either, right? I would think that humans would still act like humans, but the way that all the people, specifically the college students, are portrayed is just extra sensitive. It's over the top hyperbole of how young people act, really. And that's like kind of the metaphor of the movie, or one of them anyway, is that everybody's so sensitive about this stuff. You know, that's what I got from it anyway. They can't even be near him because these dreams are so intense, which again, on the one hand, I get, but it's also way too much, to the point where it literally frustrated me. I was starting to get angry at the movie. And what doesn't make sense is that they couldn't even be in the same room as him, but then they all went out of their way to antagonize him. Like I said, they vandalized his car. They sit there, they all stand near his car, wait for him to come and see that they have vandalized it, and then they film him while they are yelling at him and throwing things at him. If you can't even be around him, why would you go out of your way to find him and yell things at him and interact with him? I don't get that. It's like, which plot do we want to follow? Do they all hate him because of this, so they're all scared of him? We're trying to do both, but it just logically didn't make sense to me. And maybe I'm way too analytical. That's something I've talked about in plenty of my movie reviews, as the film is ruined for me because I analyze it too much. But I just can't enjoy a film that is frustrating and doesn't make sense to me and is just so unrealistic. If they had played up the unrealistic factor of the film about dreams a little bit more, then maybe I could have understood. But the logic of the film, or the environment of the film, is that these are normal, regular people. This is the normal, real world. But there's a weird phenomenon of a bunch of people having dreams about this guy. And I just don't think that this is how everybody would react to it. And that's really what the movie is about. It's just everybody antagonizing him first, like wanting to know what's going on, like talking to him, but then antagonizing him, and then that's it. That's the movie. It was interesting to watch for some parts of it. The best parts of the movie were the dream sequences where we saw what he was doing in everybody's dreams. Like, yeah, I was in the cafeteria and there was an earthquake and then you just appeared. That stuff was interesting. Those sequences were interesting, but they didn't have a whole lot of those. They should have had more. For a movie about a man in everybody's dreams, I feel like we should have maybe seen more the dreams, because most of the movie is people sitting or standing around talking about what's happening. Mainly Nick Cage talking to the head teacher at his school about what's happening, talking to his students about what's happening, talking to his wife about what's happening. And that's just not very interesting after a while. Like, I get what's happening, let's show something else. So not only were a lot of parts of the movies very frustrating for me, but a lot of it was really boring for me. About halfway through, there was a moment where I wanted to leave. I was just like, I can't sit here and watch people sit and talk in a wide angle anymore. I just can't do it. But I stuck around, so I always stick around. I've never walked out of a movie before because I always have hope that they're going to pull it out in the end. But at some point, if your whole movie is boring and or frustrating until maybe something cool happens at the very end, it's still not a good movie. But I stuck around anyway, and it wasn't. At the end of the movie, he's on his sad little book tour where shit's going wrong, a light hits him in the face, whatever. Michael Cera is there, a guy who's like trying to promote him and use him for his marketing agency. He's separated from his wife, he moved out. He's too much of a pussy to tell her that he misses her and wants to get back with her. And he's lost his job, and that's it. The dreams have stopped. And that's it. That's all. So I just don't think there was a whole lot of thought put into how this situation would really play out, or what we could do to make it more interesting if we didn't want it to be realistic. You know, because it kind of is in the balance of both. It tries to be realistic, but is too over the top with it, if that makes any sense. And then the last thing I want to say about it is the comedy of the movie. I expected it to be much funnier by the trailers and the marketing. And Nick Cage is a funny guy. He's often very funny in his movies, even when he's being like a serious character. But this seemed like a more comedic character, a comedic situation. All the comedy is just what I call cringe comedy. Like, it's all reliant on awkwardness, mainly in the interaction. So all these scenes we get of people sitting or standing around and talking, when they are talking, it's very awkward. They're just weird, awkward pauses. He makes these weird little quippy jokes because he's trying to be funny, but it's not, so nobody laughs.
I'm finally cool, huh?
I didn't say that.
You hear that, Janet? She's saying I'm a cool dad.
Guess I'll see you in my dreams.
Yeah. So of course not.
The way people talk is very awkward and strange. It's just like everybody has the same sort of socially awkward language. It's supposed to make you laugh because it's cringy. And some people might think that's funny. I fully acknowledge that. I personally do not like cringe comedy. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me cringe. And I don't like that feeling. And I'm not the type to awkwardly laugh at things. I just won't laugh if I'm uncomfortable. And so a lot of it, specifically the Michael Cera scene, was really strange in the interactions. It's Michael Cera and like 2 other people in his agency having a meeting with Nick Cage because they want to use him in marketing.
I wish I was the one people were dreaming about.
Me too.
Yeah, no, it's something.
Like, oh, Sprite wants you in their ads because if people see you holding up a can of Sprite, they're going to start seeing you and the Sprite in their dreams and use you that way. And he doesn't want to do that. He wants to focus on his book. But that whole meeting was just almost unbearable with how cringe the conversation was. I don't remember specific dialogue. I just remember the whole time it was very awkward and boring, or awkward and frustrating. And so I was feeling a lot of things that I don't like to feel. Now, on the one hand, I always say if a movie can make me feel strong emotions, it can't really be a bad movie. Unless that emotion is, I hate this movie because this movie's so bad. But if the movie wants to frustrate me, if it wanted to frustrate me, it did it. It did its job, and it did a good job of it, right? You know what I mean? If the movie wanted me to feel really awkward and uncomfortable, it sure hit the nail on the head. So if that was the goal for this movie, nailed it. I'm sure their goal wasn't to bore me throughout most of it. But those other emotions, cool, you did it. I just don't like movies that want to frustrate me or want to make me feel uncomfortable. Dream Scenario, I give that one 2 out of 5 stars. There was interesting bits about it. I wouldn't recommend it unless you're okay with cringe comedy or being frustrated. If you're interested in the scenario of Dream Scenario, you can watch it, but be warned, you might not like it. I'm sure some people like it. I'm sure it's for some people, but it's not for me. So I personally wouldn't recommend watching it. The second movie I wanted to talk about that I was also quite highly anticipating because of everything I've heard about it, the performances and the marketing was very good. There's the theater I go to, there's a bunch of posters. They change out the posters all the time, obviously, but there was one string of posters about Saltburn. There was a bunch of different character posters that had like descriptive words about the movie that said like gothic, mysterious, and like a bunch of other things that made me think that it was going to be much more exciting, eventful than it was, suspenseful maybe, like some sort of murder mystery maybe, and it kind of was. It just wasn't quite as eventful as I expected it to be with how the marketing made it seem. Like it made it seem like it was going to be this really intense like tale of love and deceit.
This place? You know, it's not for you.
Lots of people get lost in Saltburn.
I don't think I'll ever go home again.
It certainly had that stuff in it. It's just the way it was portrayed on screen wasn't as like interesting as I wanted it to be, I guess. So what Saltburn is, well, it stars Barry Keoghan and Jacob Elordi. A lot of people like Jacob Elordi. I haven't really seen any of the other stuff he's done, but he was good. He was fine. I really like Barry Keoghan. I've loved everything I've seen him in. Killing of a Sacred Deer, he was great in that movie. That's another movie that's kind of supposed to make you feel uncomfortable and upset, and it does, but it does it in a very artistic way where I had to respect it. I'm never going to watch that movie again, but I respect it and I acknowledge it as a really good film that was supposed to make me feel not good. The Banshees of Inisherin, he was really great in that. He was more of a supporting character in that movie, but he killed it. He was hilarious. He's really good at like adjusting to the role of being like a villain or like the funny character, the comic relief, or whatever it may be. He's good at that. So I was really excited mainly to see him, but also like I wasn't really sure what the movie was about. I kept hearing different things, that it was this sort of weird, different mystery suspense romance between Barry Keoghan and Jacob Elordi, and I was like, oh, that sounds great. So Barry and Jacob are in Oxford College. They are the class of 2006. At least it's implied they are. Barry Keoghan gets to Oxford, it says, welcome class of 2006, and Jacob Elordi is in his grade. And Barry Keoghan is like this nerd. He doesn't have a lot of friends. His one friend is this super nerdy guy he doesn't even like. He just doesn't have any other friends. And Jacob Elordi is the popular guy. He's always got women around him and tons of friends, and he's going to the bar every night and doing all this stuff, and everybody loves him. And it opens with a older Barry Keoghan, or older looking Barry Keoghan, talking about like when he first met Jacob Elordi. So it's kind of, it opens on a narration, them saying like, yeah, he got all the girls and everybody loved him and I loved him, but was I in love with him? I don't know, you know? So I was like, okay, this has got my attention thus far. We get to the point where Barry and Jacob meet. Their names are Oliver and Felix. I'll probably just call them Barry and Jacob as I normally do with movies, but they finally meet by chance, or so we think, when Jacob, his bike tire burst and Barry loans him his bike. So they become friends after that, and Jacob starts inviting Barry to the bar with him and his friends, and none of his friends really quite like Barry all that much, but Jacob does, and so they hang out and they bond. Pretty soon down the line, this is in the span of a couple months, it's like the last 6 months of the first semester. They're the class in 2006, then this takes place 2002 to 2003. We see them go through Christmas and stuff like that. But then we get to a point a few months down the line, their friendship is kind of a little bit rocky, but then Barry learns his father dies, and he goes to Jacob, and they bond, and he like comforts him, and Barry's like, I don't really want to go home. You know, my mom was like an addict, an alcoholic, so was my dad, and now he's dead. I don't really ever want to go home again. So he gets invited to Jacob's family home for the summer. And Jacob lives in this big-ass mansion in this town called Saltburn, hence the name of the film. So they are in Saltburn, and Jacob's family, we meet his mom and his dad and his sister, and his cousin, who they also go to Oxford with. So we've met his cousin before. Him and Barry don't really get along. And it's this whole dynamic. There's a lot of tension there. And let me just say, I didn't hate this movie. I don't even think this is a bad movie. There was just a few things that were disappointing, didn't add up to me, and it didn't quite live up to my expectations. So I am going to talk about the things that I did like about this movie, because I want to give credit where credit is due. But then obviously I will also get into why the movie was so disappointing for me. So they're all in this house together, Barry and Jacob's whole family. There's like another friend there. It's a bunch of stuff. Huge, beautiful house. And Barry's kind of like integrating himself into the family. They're all getting to know him. Things are going well at first. One thing I really want to note about this, since this is the summer after their first year in Oxford, you might assume that they like go through their final exams at the end for their first year. And you might think, well, maybe this is after all 4 years of Oxford when they've graduated and now it's 2006. That's not the case, because there's a few things along the way, even though the timeline isn't super clear. This is obviously summer. Later down the line, Jacob's sister says to Barry, like, oh, we really only known him for 6 months, so this is like the second half of the first year that they were friends, and this is the first summer, and there is one point where he says, like, I'll see you back at Oxford, so obviously they're going back. So this is the end of the first year, since they're the class of 2006, and they went through their whole first semester. This film takes place in the summer of 2003. or it's supposed to anyway, if we follow this timeline. When Barry gets there, and he gets set up in his room, Jacob shows him to his room, and then he goes to find the family, like everybody else, the mom, dad, Jacob, his sister, his cousin, all of them are like in the library together watching a movie, and they're watching the film Superbad, which came out in 2007. So, even if this is after they went through all 4 or however many years you go to Oxford, it would only be 2006, because when you graduate, it's the summer, right? June 2006. And then he comes, and they can't be watching a movie from 1 year in the future, but again, with the timeline, it's 2003. How are they watching a movie from 2007? Did you think about that, Emerald Fennell? Emerald Fennell is the director of the movie and writer, I think. She made the movie. She also made Promising Young Woman, which I really did not like. So I think maybe I'm not going to watch her movies again. There's some redeeming qualities about them. There were some redeeming qualities about Promising Young Woman, mainly Bo Burnham, and the idea behind the film is fine, but the execution was terrible. And that's pretty much how I feel about this movie as well, Saltburn. Someone sent me something on Instagram because I reviewed this movie on Letterboxd, and that's what I said about it, like how are they watching Superbad if it's 2003? And someone sent me something on Instagram that's like, apparently Emerald Fennell said it takes place in like 2007. And I said, well, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. Why are they the class of 2006 if this takes place in 2007? I don't get it. But that just goes to show, I feel like there's a lot of things in this movie that were not really well thought out, but we'll get into it. So anyway, things are going well, and then things start to get weird. Like, Barry's personality changes weirdly, kind of from nowhere, and we find out down the line he's kind of a psychopath. He is a psychopath. He's a compulsive liar, and he does a lot of really messed up things. And when that starts to show, it doesn't start to show subtly. Really. I mean, I'm sure they tried to be subtle. There's a few subtle parts. There's a scene where he walks in, or he peeks in on Jacob Elordi. They share a bathroom. Peeks in on Jacob Elordi taking a bath, and he's like obviously like jacking it in there. So when he's out of the bath and the tub is draining, Barry goes in there and sticks his face in the water as it drains near the drain and like slurps up some of the bath water, which not even that there's like, you know, discharge in there. that makes it gross. Like, that's not even why. It's just like literally face in slurping bath water. It was disgusting. I had to look away. But also, why are you doing that? He's obsessed with him. He's obsessed with him, but he's not like really sexually romantically in love with him as much as they'd like to imply that because of the other actions that he did. And maybe you're saying like, oh, he's a psychopath. Like, a psychopath's love looks differently. Sure, but I was getting a lot of weird mixed signals, and it was just very unclear about Barry's character and his motivations and how he felt about things, because the whole first part of the movie he's like really awkward and doesn't really have any friends and blah 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 until he meets Jacob, right? And so we think he's just this awkward little nerdy guy. An awkward little nerdy guy falling in love with a popular guy makes sense, but then it just gets weird, but not a good way. In kind of an insulting way, actually, with how his man-on-man love is portrayed. And not just him, but the cousin in the movie. There's some man-on-man love things happening with him, and it's all framed in like a disgusting way. Like with the slurping of the bath water. At some point, Barry Keoghan gives a hand job to the cousin after they have all this tension between each other, insulting each other. He puts Barry on the spot quite frequently and tries to embarrass him, so Barry punishes him by waking him up and giving him a hand job in the middle of the night.
Are you going to behave from now on, Farley?
No.
Say it.
I'm going to behave.
So it's framed as like deviancy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Not quite as much. Like, when I watched this with my boyfriend, he was like, oh, they frame gay people so badly as deviants, and I see where he's coming from. I don't fully agree, but I definitely see where someone could see that. It is framed very, like, gross and deviant. There's another part when we start to kind of see a different side of Barry Keoghan where he goes down on Jacob Elordi's sister during her time of the month, so we see all this blood on his mouth. So it just feels like there's no purpose for some of the grosser things that are happening. It's like it's just like shock value, sexual shock value. All of the sexual parts in the movie, most of them at least, are a little bit over the top gross, and shocking and not super purposeful. Like, the plot of him, like, hooking up with his sister does go somewhere, but I don't understand why it had to be on her period other than to show how deviant he is, or to show that he's a psycho who would do that. Like, that didn't really connect for me. The same with the bathtub thing. I was just like, this is gross. Like, why are we you know? Like, I get what we're saying here, but did we have to slurp it? You know what I mean? Anyway, I won't get into everything that happens in the movie, because I do kind of want to recommend it, because I want other people to see it, because I want, you know, to know what other people think about it. I'm sure a lot of people have different stances. I've heard a lot of people say that this movie is really good, and other people say this movie is really bad. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle here, but lots of events happen. We learn that Barry Keoghan was lying about his whole life. He doesn't actually come from addicts. Him and Jacob already on Barry Keoghan's birthday that they're going to celebrate in Saltburn with this big old party that Jacob's rich parents are throwing, and everyone's like, what are you still doing here? Like, you're just living off of these rich people, blah, blah, blah. And Barry Keoghan keeps doing these weird, deviant things with all of the family members, and weirdly stalking his friend and all that stuff. It comes to a breaking point where we find out that Barry lied. They visit his parents, and his dad is still alive. They live in a just fine middle-class house. We just find out that he lied about being abused as a child, his parents being addicts, obviously his father being dead, and so Jacob's like, you know what? We're done. You're leaving. We're not friends anymore. That's it. Like, why would you lie about all this shit? And Barry's, obviously, everything is falling apart. And then we find out later, I guess the end goal was for him to live in Jacob's house, or to own Jacob's family's house, because he kills the whole family. Pretty much. In their birthday, Barry Keoghan's birthday party, it's like Midsummer Night's Dream themed. So everyone's dressed as like fairies, and Puck with the horse head, and Barry Keoghan has these like antlers on, and what have you. The next morning, they find Jacob's dead body in the middle of this maze that they have in their yard. And we find out later that Barry poisoned him that night when he confronted him. He like poisoned him by like putting something in a bottle of alcohol that he drank, and so he died. And then the next day he's still there, and so members of the family except the mom are like, you need to leave, like, you're still here, he's dead now. Like, they don't know if it's his fault, but still, like, why are you still here? And he milks it for as long as he can, and then his sister dies. It's implied through Barry's narration, and what the implications on the screen is that she slit her wrist in the bathtub. We find out later that Barry Keoghan either slit her wrist for her or set it up for her to do that, so it's his fault. And then at that point, the dad is like, okay, my kids are dead. We don't really know you. You're not really our family. Like, you need to go. And he tries to hang on, like, no, I need to be here for your wife, blah, blah, blah. She's been so kind to me. And no, they kick him out. Years down the line, the father dies, and the mother and Barry Keoghan run into each other by chance, but not really. It's all set up, and invites him to stay with her for a while. And he slowly starts poisoning her, and then she dies. And before that happens, he somehow gets her to write him in her will. I guess at this point she has no kids because they're dead and her husband's dead. So who other than this kid that my son knew who lived with us for a couple of months many years ago. So she dies, and then the house is his. And that's it. The ending narration, Barry, we find out, is him talking to her on the hospital bed before he like strangles her as she's in her hospital bed or whatever, or takes out the tube or whatever's keeping her alive. And it was his whole plan. He set up the initial meeting with Jacob. He popped his bike tire so he could run into him and meet him. He's the one that poisoned him and killed the daughter and did all this other stuff. Which begs the question, was that the plan from the beginning, to eventually take the house? Or did the plan change? Because was the setup with the bike just to meet Jacob and become friends with him? What was the end goal there? Was the goal to become friends? And then when you realized he was rich, the goal was to get into his house, and then the goal from there was to kill everybody and own the house? I'm kind of confused where and when the plan started and what the plan was from the beginning. Because that was kind of the plot twist. That was the reveal at the end. We didn't know that he was responsible for all these deaths and everything until the very end, when he got the house. And so it's like, okay, we gotta have a twist. This is a mystery. It's supposed to be suspenseful. Here's the twist. It was him all along, which we could kind of guess because he was acting very strangely. But also, like I could have called him killing Jacob and the sister for sure. But the initial meeting and all that stuff, I was kind of like, I don't know if this all adds up. Like, if that was a chance encounter, and then he decided to, like, he lied about his dad dying to get back in Jacob's good graces because they had a falling out. That makes sense, right? If he was genuinely in love with him, and the goal was to just be with him, I get that. But then, where did the plan change, where it was no longer wanting to be with Jacob, and then wanting to kill him and his whole family and live in his house? When did that part of the plan change? You know? Which is kind of like a bit of a Parasite situation, but as if somebody watched Parasite and made their own version of it, but they didn't quite understand, because it frames the poorer person in this situation very, very badly. Like, poor people will do whatever it takes to get what rich people have. And the rich people throughout this film, Jacob and his family, are very nice and welcoming for the most part and give Barry everything he wants and needs. The only person he really has trouble with was the cousin, who kind of called him out for doing just that, taking advantage of this very kind, super rich family. Which is not the point of films like Parasite, right? Where, like, the rich people might be kind on the surface, but they can afford to be kind because they're rich and they have more than poor people could ever have, and they don't realize that. And they could be doing a lot, you know, and the poor people, like, it's not their fault that they're poor, and they're not bad people for wanting better for themselves, right? And trying to take from people who have more than they could ever want, you know? It's a whole different thing. And it's like the problems of, like, our capitalist society, where some people are on the bottom and some people are on the top, and it's just not fair, you know, and they want to even it out. Saltburn misses that completely. And like I said, it frames Barry as this, and he's not even poor. He's a middle-class guy. He lied about being poor and abused. He actually has quite an average upbringing and life and a home and a loving family, but he's just, I guess, really selfish and psychotic and wants more. And so he kills all the poor, innocent, rich people to get what they have. And so I'm just wondering, like, what are you trying to say here with this film? What's the point, right? What am I supposed to learn from this, if anything? And if I'm not supposed to learn anything, again, what's the point? But really, yeah, all of that, and just the fact that it's not super eventful. I wouldn't say it's a slow burn, but it's not like action in the sense of, like, fighting and car chases and stuff, but action is in, like, people doing stuff isn't a lot. And what I expected was more of a suspense, more of a mystery, more of, like, things happening and building up. What's going on? And it's not really that. When, like, the deaths and things happen, it's very sudden, and it happens at the very end of the movie, and it all happens kind of in succession. And, like, the build-up to it isn't really a high build-up. Like, the build-up is very, like, minimal, and then all of that happens. You know, and I wanted more along the way to keep me interested in whatever this mystery was that we're trying to figure it out. It wasn't really clear. And I guess that's really the main thing. It wasn't really clear what this character wanted, where this film was going, why any of it was happening. It just, a lot of it seemed to be, like, for the aesthetic of it. And, oh, isn't he crazy? Isn't this weird? You know, and it was. The thing that saved the movie for me were the performances. Honestly, the performances by Barry Keoghan, Jacob Elordi, Rosamund Pike, who plays the mother, everybody else in the film, they all did great with their characters. I loved the performances. I loved watching them. I loved hearing them. The set was amazing. Like, the mansion that they're in was amazing. The maze and everything that was outside. Oxford was cool, even. All of that made up for quite a bit, to the point where I wouldn't even say I disliked the movie. I would say I liked it because I liked watching it from a purely aesthetic standpoint. I liked watching the characters. I liked the sets, right? The story itself is where the film failed for me and didn't make sense. So for all those reasons, as confusing as I feel about the movie, I give it a 3 out of 5. It might be a 2.5, but I'm kind of like, There's half of me that liked it and half of me that was like, what is this trash? Like, so it all culminated together in like a 2.5 or 3 out of 5 area. And like I said before, I would recommend it, not because I think it's a great movie. I disagree with my perceived message of what the film was, but the actors were really good, and it was fun to watch for that reason. And it was an interesting journey. Not necessarily in a good way, but it was interesting, and I wasn't bored. That's pretty much all I have to say about Saltburn. I would love to hear what other people have to say, so definitely let me know in the comments. Okay, so last thing I want to go over before the end of this video is I just want to mention a few other movies that I've seen recently that I also didn't like. We went through the ones that I liked, and then I just want to mention some movies that I didn't like that I also will not be making a video about, just so that everybody knows all the movies that I've been seeing. So Silent Night is one of them. That one I gave a 1.5. I'd made a whole TikTok on it that pretty much explains everything. It's just my 3-minute explanation of why I didn't like it, so you can check that on my TikTok. Candy Cane Lane on Amazon Prime, starring Eddie Murphy. That one I gave a half star. I did not like it at all. It was not funny. It just wasn't good. I almost included it in this video, but I felt like it was pointless because it was just such a nothing movie. It was like an AI generated factory made Christmas movie, and I hate those. Wish, which I don't know. I'll talk more about Wish probably in my end of the year video. It was just a downhill Disney movie for me. None of the songs were bangers. The main character was annoying. It was pretty much exactly what I expected. I gave that one 2 out of 5. Leo on Netflix, the Adam Sandler movie where he's like an iguana. It was fine. It was mostly him just like talking to kids and giving them advice and confidence, which I expected more. I don't know why I expected more, but I don't know. It was just kind of like, whatever. It's kind of cute, I guess. And that was it. There's still plenty of movies that I'm planning to see, so we'll see which ones are good or bad enough to make it into a video. Any of the films I mentioned, if you have anything to say about them, I'd love to hear it. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!
Thanks for watching, honeybees. Make sure to like and subscribe. Bye!
Meow!